This video focuses on Henry David Thoreau's essay, Resistance to Civil Government. You'll notice too that I've also added the title, Civil Disobedience. This title is often used in reference to this essay, so you are welcome to use that if you prefer that. Some background on Thoreau's life that will help us in getting some context here for understanding the essay. Thoreau was a resident of Concord, Massachusetts. This is the same town where Emerson and Hawthorne for a while lived, as well as the Alcott family, as in Louisa May Alcott. He wrote a book entitled Walden that is one of the important environmentalist writings of the 19th century. This is the story of his time out at Walden Pond. He built a cabin there. He stayed there for 2 years and 2 months. As the biographical information points out, though, he was quite a curiosity to the town, and he did become a sort of tourist attraction. So many people visited him, and he did go into town, so he was not completely isolated, in other words. But he attempted to live close to the earth, to farm and to observe nature and to write about what he saw. He is known as one who did put into action Emerson's theories regarding the human relationship with the natural world. So Emerson is the more theoretical, and Thoreau is the more down-to-earth, put into practice. In writing Resistance to Civil Government, many did see him as a radical, and although the essay didn't receive too much recognition during his lifetime, the recognition it did receive did tend to be more negative. However, this essay has had great influence on important individuals who are working for civil rights, working for human rights, such as Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. The focus of the essay, as Thoreau opens, is addressing what government should and should not be and the importance of the citizen. He points out as he opens, he says that government is best which governs not at all. He is not one who is looking for big government, but he does emphasize that government is such that it is not what actually moves the nation. It is not what keeps the country free, settles the West, or educates the people. It is the people themselves that do these things. And he emphasizes the importance of the power should come from the people. And that power is something that the people give to the government to act and to govern. He says that he is looking for a better government. He is not saying totally get rid of the government either. He states, though, that oftentimes people who claim to be citizens just go along with what the government does. They are not engaged citizens, in other words. Over on page 968, he says, the mass of men serve the state thus. This is right after the blocked quote. Not as men mainly, but as machines with their bodies. He does refer specifically here to people who are in the military, but I think, too, he suggests that citizens have a tendency just to sit back and expect the government to take the actions, when it is important that citizens not just be cogs in a wheel, parts of a machine, but instead must step forward to take action and to be a part of the government, whatever that might be, but it is important for us not just to sit back and let other people run society. He says, too, in this same section, if you'll look on through this same paragraph, that typically it has been, though, that those individuals who are heroes, patriots, martyrs, and reformers, those people that we really value when we look back at the founding of the country, for example. He says, in the great sense, and men serve the state with their consciences also, and so necessarily resist it for the most part, and they are commonly treated by it as enemies. He says, typically, though, it has been that when there are people who step forward when they see injustice being done in our government or in society, that those people, on the one hand, have been labeled by us looking back as great heroes, but in the moment, oftentimes they are identified as being enemies. Look back to the American Revolution, for example. To emphasize, he, in this essay, is making the point that if we as citizens see injustice being done by our government in our society, that we should step forward. I think he echoes words that Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence with making this statement. He says specifically that it is important to rebel against the system, to be a revolutionary against the system if we see injustice. He is responding specifically to see what he saw going on during his own day and time. He is responding here to the Mexican War of 1846 to 48. If you look at the note at the bottom of page 965, he specifically refers to this war as an executives war. I'm sorry, the note refers specifically to the war as an executives war, a war that many New Englanders, our book points out, including Thoreau, regarded as part of the South's effort to extend the territorial domain of slavery. In other words, through this war, the United States would be laying claim to land that would help extend the boundaries of slavery westward. He was totally against the United States doing this, totally against the perpetuation of slavery, and was one, too, who favored the Civil War when it came about because he believed that was the best route for the United States to take to end slavery. But here he is responding to the injustice that he sees in the United States extending the territory of slavery. He sees to the injustice of people even in his own community in New England, merchants and farmers who are benefiting from the slave system, and that goods from the South, cotton, for example, were shipped northward, were used in industry, and then the crop was made into goods in the industrial system in New England and then sold. He's saying, in other words, that New Englanders profited as well from the slave system. So it's not just the fact that they were growing the crop, but they were using the crop, cotton, for example, in their factories, and ultimately they became part of the system in making money off of the crop too. So he says that people in our area, his area, need to recognize too that they are complicit. He emphasizes the point too that he believes that we should not be like the odd fellow. I believe I referred to this passage when we looked at the Melville piece. Here he refers specifically to the Odd Fellows. This is a philanthropic organization that actually still exists. He says at the top of page 969, this organization is one that gives money to the widows and the orphans, but they also like to use their organ of gregariousness quite a bit as well. These are people that are big talkers, in other words. Their organ of gregariousness would be their mouth. He emphasizes the point that we can't just throw money at issues. We do need to get involved and take action. So how do you take action? He says it's important to point out injustices when we see them. It's important to break the law if you see injustice being done. For him, he refused to pay his poll tax, and he went to jail because of that. He says an important way to speak your mind is to withhold your money. And specifically here, he is withholding his money from his state and from the government, and so is trying to stop the machine from working. He does not want his money to go toward an institution that, in effect, he sees as supporting slavery. He believes, too, it's important to have a peaceable revolution, that is civil disobedience. You can act civilly. You can take action civilly without using violence. For example, his going to jail was a non-violent resistance. Now, he says that he chose the poll tax in particular as the tax he would not pay. This is the tax that was required to vote, the poll, P-O-L-L. He says he decided not to choose other sorts of taxes, for example, tax that might provide money for the common good, for example, for building roads, for support of schools, for example. He strategically chose the poll tax. Ultimately, he tells us the story of being jailed because he didn't pay the tax. It is someone else, though, who ultimately pays it, and he is released. He says someone interfered. There's speculation it was Emerson who was the one that interfered and paid the tax for him. Finally, he ties the concepts that he writes about here with the rights of man. As he closes the essay, he refers to those rights of man that we have seen mentioned by other writers, not only in the Declaration of Independence, but also in other texts, in large part some that deal with gender and race, the importance of rights of man for all human beings. He emphasizes here in his closing lines, there will never be a really free and enlightened state until the state comes to recognize the individual as a higher and independent power. He emphasizes at the end of this essay, then, the importance of recognizing that for government, it is from the people that those powers come. It is not from the government itself. Now, I'm going to ask you in your discussion question to do a little bit of thinking here, too, about what he wants you to do in response to this essay, and to see if you're convinced, too, by what he argues here. Essentially, he is saying that you should, in large part, go beyond your thinking of just yourself. He is one who was not directly impacted by slavery. It was something that was very much distant from his everyday focus, but he stepped outside of the realm of his own life to recognize that other people were greatly impacted, obviously quite greatly impacted by slavery in the United States. So please take a look at the discussion questions. I hope they will give you something to think about concerning your own life.